Welcome everyone to another beautiful day with another great podcast. Yet again, I do not have a clue what this gentleman does, but I know this is going to be a special podcast. I know this guy is very skillful and he has a rich history. I can tell it in my bones. We spoke briefly just for about 2 minutes. And so, Owen Marcus is going to be with us today and answer some interesting questions. Welcome, Owen. How are you today?
I'm doing well. And it's Elie?
It's Elie.
Elie. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. There's no problem. I've been called worse. So that's a good thing. At least you did that and you didn't call me something else. So how we're going to start this, Owen, is that you're going to just tell us what you do to help people. You've obviously got a successful business, and then we'll go with the flow.
All right. What do I do to help people these days is I primarily help men. And I've been in the general field of healthcare for essentially 50 years. And 30 years ago, I sort of went down another track because I needed to go down that track because I needed to develop relationship skills I never really had developed. And so I started getting into men's groups, and one thing led to another. And then that was 30 years ago. And then 20 years ago, I changed the whole model of men's group and consequently men's work, and really integrated a lot of what I'd learned and been practicing clinically. I had a integrated medical clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, into men's work, which essentially meant integrating the somatic or body aspect of working with men and emotions and working with our physiology, specifically the physiology of stress. And so rather than having stress take us out, learning how to use that physiology to connect to our own experience, which innately allows us to connect to other people and other men. And I started a group in North Idaho, near the Canadian border 20 years ago, using this model. And it just exploded, and the word got out, and people and men really from all over the world started coming to me. And out of that, created 3 businesses that evolved to be sort of the state of the art in supporting men through trainings, virtual live trainings, coaching, group coaching, books, and pretty much every way we could to support men.
Okay, but how do you support men? Is there a particular subject matter that you support them on? Or what exactly is it that you support them on?
We support them in what they need. And most men come to us because, like me, their relationships, usually their primary relationships, weren't working. Some are, professional men that just want to increase their effectiveness at work. But it's all around, ends up being around, how they're dealing with their emotions. And so as men in this culture, we've been limited for a few different reasons around our emotional abilities. One is stress and trauma and how we've been impacted by that.
Okay.
Another is our enculturation, how the culture trained us or didn't train us around creating emotional connections with ourselves and others. And the third is what they call attachment theory, which is really the science of how we need to be connected. Like we know we need to survive, which is the first one I spoke about. But the other is that we need to be connected. And particularly as men, as we get older, we don't have connection when we have isolation. And now that's getting a lot of press, which is good. Mm-hmm. But society doesn't really know how to teach people, particularly men, and how to develop these skills, which really should be innate. And because they're innate or they're still hardwired in us, they're in our physiology, it doesn't take a lot for most men to learn these skills. And once they learn them, they become sustainable and generative in the sense that they adapt them to other parts of their lives.
Do you know what? This subject actually interests me massively because myself, I have a problem with connecting with men. I always have done. So it's a situation when I sit with a man one-to-one, I feel a bit awkward, even though I can engage with men. I find it much easier engaging with women. And there's a reason for that. I find it easier to have that conversation with women and connect with women, listen, but men I always struggle with. So when you talk about, you specifically focus on men and how they engage with each other, and how, I suppose what you're saying is how they can use their emotions to become better leaders, or just to be able to just engage with anyone. That interests me a lot. So like you said, you've been doing this for about 30 years because you went through this journey of gaining the skill yourself and obviously offering this skill to men to help them. How long have you been helping them from a professional point of view? Because I take it, first of all, it was you're trying to help them from an emotional point of view, but then you went through the stage of professionally, you started helping them.
That was always there in some ways, because once a man learns the skill, maybe his first motivation is more at home or applying it at home, they would see improvements at work. Okay. And so they go, if they were like a private client, they go, all right, Owen, in 3 months, we've turned around my relationship, where, it was looking like I was going to get a divorce. We're connecting in ways that I never thought possible. Yeah. But I'm seeing that, without any effort, it's shifting how I show up at work. Yeah. Can we work on that a little more? And we do. So because these are such critical and really natural skills that we should have, that once we start to learn them, they generalize throughout our whole life without much effort.
Yeah, no, I can see that, because basically what you're trying to do is shift their core from the mindset point of view. And once they start to change their attitude in life in general, I suppose that ricochets in pretty much everything within their life, would you say?
Yes, I would. And I'd sort of flip that.
Okay.
And what I would say is that, I don't need to go into all the history, but essentially in this culture, we've been trained for different reasons to have a really top-down view of things, which means we tend to be more cognitive, analytical, and those, have been real popular: psychotherapies, cognitive therapy, analytical therapy. And so my approach, and this is why I think it's so successful and guys just pick it up real naturally, it's a bottom-up approach. And I've seen this for 50 years, but now the research is really backing it up. And that the research says when we have an experience, we first have it somatically or physically. Our bodies respond, in a millisecond. And then we have an emotional experience, which we often aren't aware of, but we're having it, like we're not aware of the physical. And then we have the mental awareness. So we've been trained by the culture and school and everything else, and often therapy, that's where it's at. It's like, if I just understand this, I can fix it. But, these issues that men deal with, I've dealt with, maybe you deal with, and maybe everyone in society deals with, is more than a mental issue. So if it was just a mental or cognitive issue, it'd be like a math problem. We'd figure it out and we'd be done with it. But relationships are not cognitive. So yes, having an understanding helps. And one of the things we do in the beginning is we give men a new model to couch or to frame this whole experience in, which is this model of physiology of stress, which we teach. And we first teach it, somewhat superficially, just as a context. And then as we train men more and more down the professional realm, we get deeper into the hard science of it. So as men understand, but particularly experience or learn to experience experiences on a somatic or physical level, which sets them up to expand into the emotional experience, everything starts to shift. Like you were saying, before you came on, about yesterday being tight, you meditated and it shifted it. That's essentially what we're doing. We're down regulating that stress response for guys. And we, years of doing this, I have ways to really facilitate it and shorten it, where guys can do it in a matter of a moment, and they shift their orientation, because the shift is really happening somatically and emotionally. And when, as you said, with your meditation, when that shifted on that level, then your mind shifted and you were able to approach the problem differently with a lot less stress.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually touched on that because I was going to ask you, okay, the mental side of it you said is one thing, but the physical. So I wanted to understand, okay, how do you deal on the physical realm? Because there's many ways you can do it. So as we briefly had that conversation, 2-minute conversation before we came on, so listeners, what happened is that I had a very busy day yesterday and it was chaotic. And so, with my dyslexia and other issues, at the end of the day, I felt like there was a huge wall in front of me, and I couldn't actually express myself at the end of the day because so much went on, and in a way that it got quite intense. So the way I got rounded is I meditated. I'm a Buddhist, and so I prayed, and I was able to get rid of the anxiety to put things in perspective, so you know what's going on. So Owen seems to have a similar thing going on in the background, but I'm going to ask Owen just to give us just a snippet of what he does from a physical point of view. Now we know what I do. Now, how does Owen give us an example, Owen, physically, what you would do to help someone if they're quite anxious or whatever? Give us an extreme problem with a client. Obviously, you're not going to name the client, but give us an extreme problem and you had to help them physically to be able to get through their issues.
I've, in all the years, I've had everything, guys that were suicidal, but they don't come to me in that specific crisis. But essentially and there's a lot of ways we approach it, but one way to sort of frame it is probably very similar to what you do. So we teach somatic mindfulness. So, in which in some ways you could say originally came from a Buddhist tradition. And so we teach men to be not just mindful of their thoughts, but really mindful of their body. And there's several advantages to that. And that when you're mindful or aware and accepting of your experience, your somatic or physical experience, first you get out of your head and the anxiousness and all that, you get into your body. And then often in that instant when you make that shift, it might get a little worse. You might feel the tension in the shoulder. You might feel more anxious. You might feel the fear behind the anxiousness. But that's the acceptance. And it can be just a second. And then it starts to dissipate. And then you go more into the body. Oh, all right. Or maybe it's not even the emotion. You're feeling your shoulders. You're feeling your heartbeat. You're feeling your breath. Whatever the cues are, it doesn't matter. And it's just being aware of it, accepting it. And what's happening in the background when you do that, physiologically and emotionally, I guess mentally, you're telling yourself you're safe. So you go out of a threat response or a survival response into, a downregulated, relaxed, what they call in the nervous system, the parasympathetic state or the rest and digest part where you're downregulated. And so when we're in a threat response, we're hardwired to be oriented outside, like the animal, the tiger might be coming at us and, all our resources are focused on just being aware and then maybe, running or fighting or whatever it might be. So it's a very external focus. So what I discovered is that when we do, these things where we're aware of our physical experience, we're telling ourselves that we must be safe because we've reoriented from the external to the internal. So in the background, right there, we're going, okay, I guess I'm a little safer. And then you just start feeling more. And I've had guys, yes, that were, relatively anxious or upset and just connecting to their body in a minute or so, maybe myself or someone else is guiding them, it starts to shift like it does in your meditation.
That's really interesting. Now, what I want to know, you discovered this not overnight. This was a situation, and I'm sure you didn't do this through an educational route, but through experience, through your own experience in life, interacting with other people. Just take us into that, because this can be quite a complicated situation when it comes to dealing with the male psyche. And obviously, you didn't gain that overnight. It had to start somewhere. So just give us a little insight where all this may have started.
Well, just to back up even more. So I struggled in school. I didn't realize I was dyslexic until I was in graduate school. I was taking this speed reading course, and the guy knew I was trying. He said, "Are you dyslexic?" I said, "I don't think I am." But he said, "Can you do the cross crawl?" You know what the cross crawl is?
No, I don't actually. Tell me.
I didn't then. He says, babies learn to crawl unilaterally, right leg, right arm, and then at certain point in our development, we go cross laterally. Right arm, left leg, we move. And so, I said, hell yeah, I'll try. I got down on my fours. I could not do it. I could not move my right leg and my left arm.
Interesting.
And so, I immediately knew, and he knew, oh, you're dyslexic. That's why you can't, learn how to speed read. So I went on a whole healing routine because, I was in holistic health and all that. Okay. Healed much of my dyslexia. And then later on, I realized I'd had Asperger's, or I was on the spectrum. So I started healing that. I haven't healed all of it, but healed a significant part of it. And then, of course, I sort of knew I was ADD as a kid because I was always active. I also had dyspraxia, which is like dyslexia of the body, because when I was a kid, I was very uncoordinated. So, I went to heal a lot of this, healed a lot of it, the majority of it, but a lot of it, some of it still lingers. And one of them is auditory, which is like, I'm terrible with names, reading them, spelling them, remembering them, all that. And that sort of pushed me in this direction of working with bodies, my body, other bodies. And then, I saw benefits with myself when I used some of these things. I was learning from the experts, because back in the late 70s, I was living in Boulder, Colorado, which was sort of a mini San Francisco. And it was the birthplace for all these somatic psychotherapies and somatic, physical therapies, which I was studying. I spent 4 years. It was sort of like a postgraduate PhD degree in all this. So I studied with these guys that went on to be world famous, creating, these now leading technologies or therapies that everyone wants to study that are based on the body. So I was like in all their first professional trainings. And that was something I weaved into my clinical practice. And then 20 years ago, shifted the whole model of working with men and just built a foundation of this work on all the things I'd learned, sort of academically, experientially, and then through thousands and thousands of hours of working with clients and working with myself. Okay. I just honed it and learned how to make it really efficient in terms of teaching it and effective for guys. And one of the things I learned in my clinic is if I could ask you or any other guy, what did you feel emotionally? And I was one of them. We'd want to get out of the room as quickly as we could. But no one would resist answering the question, what do you feel physically? Where's your tension? Where's this or that in your body? Even if you didn't know, you weren't resisting. You just didn't know, and you'd allow me to help you. So I quickly discovered that working with guys, if I approached it physically or within a stress context, guys would not resist. And then we'd have a conversation, and not just an intellectual conversation, but an experiential conversation about what they were feeling in their body. And almost innately, the man would just generally shift into telling me what he was feeling emotionally. And if he hadn't shifted, to ask that emotional question was really easy, because one, we had a rapport. Two, he was starting to feel it in his body, and it was no big deal.
I'll tell you what, you took us through a journey there. That's for sure. There's a few things I want to touch on, but first thing is first. What I want to speak about, we didn't really talk much about how difficult your dyslexia was, how it realistically felt for you. So now you've got hindsight and you go back and look at your dyslexia, just go back as far as you can when things were really, really difficult, when you didn't know you had dyslexia, when you didn't know what was wrong, but just give us a snippet of how difficult it could be for you in the day in the life of Owen.
So it was particularly difficult in elementary school. I struggled in most subjects, math or arithmetic, reading. and they were looking at putting me, back a grade. And, I had all those classical things that now it's obvious I had dyslexia, but, I grew up in the 60s. So, and in many ways, I think it was positive that there weren't all these diagnoses back then. So I didn't get shamed. I didn't get put in the boxes. Yeah, I struggled. And then also realizing, the Asperger's, the social difficulties too played into. And then I was coordinated and I had a speech impediment.
Okay.
So there was a lot of reasons why boys would pick on me.
Yeah.
And then it was like in 6th grade before we moved, some guy was picking on me and I just got pissed and took a swing and broke his nose.
Interesting.
And that was sort of a shift. I mean, I started asserting myself, and then we moved, and then I just said, I'm going to reset myself. And by the time I went to junior high, and by the time I entered high school, I was relatively popular because I found a way to use, again, I didn't have any of these diagnoses, but my uniqueness. I was a bit of a juvenile delinquent. I was out there. I just let myself start to be myself. And I got better academically. I found subjects that I actually enjoyed and I, could work at. And I went to a very good high school and graduated exactly in the middle of the class, which was a bit of a accomplishment for me. And then went on to college. So,
Owen, let me just stop you there. I'm curious about something in particular. You said there a switch. There was a change when you broke obviously the boy's nose. It's not the breaking that interests me the most. It's the actual switch where you decided to do something and enough was enough. Why at that particular point in your life was enough?
I think it was just, say, the 6 years of elementary school, and then that one moment getting picked on, and I just lost control because I was very controlling. And that made me tight, made my body very tight, which I didn't know then, but I understood when I got into all this body stuff later on.
Okay.
And it, that rage, the pent up rage from all the other things in my childhood, in that moment just was too great for my control. And without thinking, and that was the key, without thinking, I took action. It wasn't that I broke the kid's nose, it was I took action.
That's right.
And that, and before then, my strategy was to survive by trying to hide, by not taking action, by ignoring, all those things. And in that moment, I took action. And then, I won the fight. And then the next day, they sent a bigger kid. I won that fight. And then I went, oh, shit, I'm going to get smart here because they're going to keep sending bigger kids. The third fight, I didn't lose. I didn't win. We sort of had a truce. And for the rest of that school year, I was more or less accepted. They didn't pick on me anymore. Because in hindsight, I was being the victim.
Yes.
But that was my survival strategy. And I didn't know them, but that was really the beginning of me coming out, which, to this day, I'm 71, continues.
Do you know what? I'm glad. I mean, everybody has a point in their life where they struggle before something makes them make a positive action. And sometimes it could just be for a year when something has been continuously built, and other people take 50 years. And that's why I was interested in what triggered you to make that change, which was a significant change within your life. But also, what I like is that you were clever enough to say, okay, after the third time when you're having the fight, I've got to be quite clever with this. So you see, were a very intelligent guy. Instead of going with the flow and thinking, I quite like this, I'm not going to be bullied anymore. I'm going to be the bully. Because you could have gone in the completely different direction, right? And you didn't do that. You made the change, saw things were going in the right direction, but you thought, hold on, let's be clever about this. So as much as you were dyslexic and you had all these other things, and you were a highly intelligent person and you went forward in a positive way. And I'm just trying to get people to see that we all go through our trials and tribulations, but there will be a time when you can and will make the change. As much as it's difficult, much as it's hard, and as much as it feels impossible, it is always a time when something will just tip you on that edge. And at that point, the change will happen. But at the same time, you've got to know how far to go with that change, because you can go too far. And Owen, what do you think on that?
I would agree. And I would add that I think it's true of anyone, but particularly us neurodivergent people. I think there's a huge gift in the challenges we have. And now, again, I didn't understand that.
No, you didn't.
Then,
Oh, no. Mm-hmm.
But and now I do. That one of the keys of my success in developing this whole way of working with people, and particularly men, really, in many ways, comes from my what might be called disabilities in another context, really are gifts. Because I work with a lot of dyslexics. One of the things I see with dyslexics is that we always perceive things differently, and we have to find different solutions to problems. Yeah. And often those solutions are better than the standard.
That's
solution.
Right.
And maybe more so, we learn a different way of thinking, which you've touched on. I mean, I didn't know it was, but it was we learn or have a different kind of intelligence that often initially is not seen or appreciated by others, even ourselves. But if we're willing to let it go, maybe trust it or develop it, inevitably we will discover things and be successful in ways that other people would never have been.
Totally. I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, I found this out later on in my life. I struggle with my dyslexia, amongst other things. And I always thought it was a pain in the ass until relatively recently. I then thought, hold on a minute here, this is actually quite a skill. There's always positives and negatives to anything in life. So let's look at it. Let's look at this. And it's an amazing thing when we resolve problems, as you say, in a unique way, then you can have a unique business. You can uniquely interact with your partner. You can uniquely resolve. You don't have to be like anybody else. And you don't want to be like anybody else. Otherwise, you're competing with everybody else, right? Does that make sense?
Right. And, if you're really going to make a contribution to the planet, you're going to have to come up with something new.
Yeah.
Or at least do it in a new way.
Yes.
And being neurodivergent, you got it
on the table. Yeah, you got it right there. It's always going to be new because we always think in a different way. Okay, so we've seen some of your trials and tribulations. We understand that not only with dyslexia, but there's other things happening with you. So there's lots of complex issues there. Some people have just got one thing that's happening underlined within them. What were the other issues that you've spoken about? So other than dyslexia, what other issues did you have that you had to deal with?
Well, I was really uncoordinated, and that was a function of part because I was so tight because of all these things, and my family, and so the emotional stuff and the physical. So I just got tighter and tighter. But more than that, it was my brain in connection with my body just did not have all the real connections. So I was very.
But what do you mean? But what do you mean by connection? Just give us an example.
Well, I remember in high school, our high school had all the sports. It didn't have anything to do with me. I ended up in one of the top high schools in the U.S. and so, like in gym class, we had tennis lessons, and I can remember it was like a little hill behind the court, and my friends would sit there, and they'd laugh at me in a funny, supportive way. It wouldn't be making fun of me. How I couldn't even hit the tennis ball with a huge tennis racket. I mean, that's how uncoordinated I was. And as a young kid, my mother had me take tennis lessons, which was a joke too. So it wasn't like the first time I held a racket, but so back then I had no hand-eye coordination. One of the things I could do pretty well was ski, because there was no hand-eye coordination. It was all somatic. It was how I felt on the slope, and I became a pretty good skier because of that. But anything that developed back then that meant hand-eye coordination, I couldn't do. Now I'm pretty good with it.
Hold on. That don't make sense. Skiing, I'm sure you would need some hand and eye coordination with that. So how does that work around that situation? Just explain to me a bit more.
Well, generally skiing on a big slope, maybe around trees, but it's more what you're seeing in a general way. And the movement is really a function of shifting your weight and subtly moving your legs. And it has to do with more of a feel than, say, hitting a ball that's coming at you.
Well, the reason why I'm ignorant, because I've never skied, so this is why I'm asking. So because I'm thinking, okay. Okay, so it's more of a more of a feel, and that's why you were able to do this and enjoy at least some sport.
Yes.
And you must have enjoyed this immensely because it's something that you could do very well.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it for that, and I enjoyed it because it was, you know, a workout, and I enjoyed it because it was in nature, and I enjoyed it because I was doing it with my friends and all that. Yes, and it was something I could succeed at and excel at.
Right. Now, what I'm really curious, you said about your healing, you was able to heal, not fully, but partially, the issues that you had. So how were you able to heal dyslexia? How to just bring us through the process?
Well, I probably healed a good 80% of it. Probably the one dyslexia I have that impacts me the most is the auditory. I mean, my hearing is good, but this is why I didn't know, again, I had dyslexia, but I couldn't learn languages. You know, English was even hard, but learning a foreign language or music, you know, it's like the things weren't connected. And it's still a lot of that there. But most of it improved, first because my body relaxed. And one of the first things I did was I got Rolf. And Rolfing was developed by Dr. Rolf. Never wanted it named after her, but that's what happened. And she discovered that when you release the chronic stress in your body, particularly the fascia, and the fascia is a connective tissue that holds everything together, and it becomes scar tissue or the gristle, the tension in your body. When you can release it in an appropriate way, the body will realign itself with gravity, literally straighten out, and the chronic stress would leave your body. So the guy that wrote the book on stress over 50 years ago was a physician named Hamstelia. He was in the US, and they call him a quack, so he had to go to Canada because he's a little ahead of his time. But he called fascia the organ of stress. So what that means is when we have stress, physical or emotional stress is more on the stress or emotional end rather than the physical, like you know, a sport thing. It goes into the fascia, and then it's self-perpetuating. So we think we store it in our brain, and then we really store emotion and stress in our bodies. And so I went through the typical 10 sessions of Rolfing once a week. 9 months later, I was just short of an inch taller and just short of 20 pounds lighter. And I was never fat. You know, you can see I'm not fat, but I had legs that were huge, and they were so tight, I didn't walk, I waddled. And my friends would joke about seeing me a block away because, you know, how I walked. And all that melted away. And when the physical melted away, a lot of the chronic emotional and physical tension melted away. And a lot of the control, the affects of dyslexia and Asperger's melted away. And then I started doing other therapies that really helped. And now, you know, I have a few inconveniences with some of these things, but I'm not really limited.
Right. So I take it with this experience you've had, healing, all these attributes that you've gone through, you've added that into the services that you give to men. So this is the part of the physical side you was talking about when it comes to helping men, and then, you know, as well as the mental. But you said there's two parts to the whole process. So your whole journey with everything you've had to struggle with, because it was a struggle with certain things, as well as it was a bonus, has come to the point how your business has come together. You're using the experience, your life experience, to help men, which, to be honest, I've noticed when I do this podcast, and I've spoken to a lot of people, they're using their life, not their educational, their life experience to help people, which what I've noticed with neurodivergent people, this is what they do.
You're right. And I, you know, I got, you know, graduate degrees, and, you know, I've had a lot of academic training, but you're right. It's based in my experience of myself and my experience of helping thousands and thousands of people in all different kinds of contexts, from one-to-one to corporate. And yeah, a couple of things. I found that all men are they have a little Asperger's when it comes to emotions. Now, they're not as bad as I was, but we're, the average guy is a little disconnected or awkward around their emotions because of what I said before, stress and really the culture. So I can relate to their struggle because I had it to the nth degree. So in discovering what worked for me, and in a lesser extent, it works for all other guys. So getting them, out of their head and out of feeling shamed or whatever, it keeps them locked up in their inability to connect to themselves and others. I've found ways to expedite that whole process that works for guys and is sustainable. And you're right, mainly because of my own experience.
Okay, so many people know and understand about dyslexia, and we've described about what dyslexia is all about and how you've actually struggled with that. Asperger's is another thing altogether. Not everybody really, they've heard it, but they don't know exactly what that's all about. So let's help some people out there that's not quite understanding the underpinnings of what Asperger's is all about. Just put it in layman's terms, what Asperger's is all about.
Yeah, it was some French guy that, it was over 100 years ago that discovered it, and they sort of forgot about it. And now most clinicians don't use that word. They just say you're on the autistic
spectrum.
Yeah, maybe lower on the spectrum, but you have it. So I don't care what you call it. But what was it? A good 20 years ago, maybe 30, I can't remember now. But I think I heard a program on NPR, the radio station channel, and they were talking about Asperger's thing, and they went through it. And I go, sounds like me. So I immediately looked it up, and if there were 12 symptoms, I had at least 10 of them. And so these are some of the ones I remember: bad penmanship, terrible penmanship, emotionally awkward, socially awkward, certainly true. And then they talk about, as a kid, this little professor phenomena where the kid might not be interested in or good at anything, and usually it's more boys or men than girls or women. But then there's like one thing he's like a geek about, he's really into and he's brilliant with. And I didn't really have that as a kid, more as an adult. This is sort of the thing that I geek out about in terms of helping men and all the parts of it that we're talking about. But so I think you can look it up and you can just sort of go through the symptoms, and I don't think that most people that have dyslexia have Asperger's. I just happen to get real lucky and have both. And then on top of all that, I got Lyme disease as a kid.
My God.
17, and I didn't know I did until 6 years ago. And then I went and cured that. And actually the Lyme disease ended up being my biggest limitation, because the Lyme disease caused chronic fatigue, which it just took away my energy until I go and realized I had it. And then once I had it, I put together a protocol. In 6 months, I completely healed the disease, got rid of it after, all these decades of having it, and then worked on, getting rid of the chronic fatigue.
That's amazing. So you had this amazing curiosity when it comes to natural therapies. And when you're talking about healing, you do things from a natural point of view. Is that correct?
Completely.
And why did you decide to go down that stage from the beginning, to go down the natural path rather than using medication and elsewhere?
Well, first, fortunately back then there weren't any meds. Second, being neurodivergent or whatever, if there's another door, I'll go down it rather than the normal door. That's part of it. But, I was smart enough, and I had docs working for me or whatever. I knew a lot of docs and clients, and I saw the effects. So I quickly learned that traditional medicine does not work. I mean, there's a new book out by a Stanford physician. Her name is Casey Mean, and she wrote a book that came out in the last year called Good Energy, that really goes to the root of all this. And But essentially, I just realized that medicine in no way would help me, would probably make me worse. And so I, was always open to try things. And I would say easily 80%, probably over 90% of the things I tried gave me some benefit and some huge benefits. And like Rolfing was the first. And I learned to be open. And at the end, I had nothing to lose other than time and money, because these therapies aren't dangerous. And I do it because, at 71, I'm healthier than I've ever been in my life, stronger, happier. And
I tell you what, Owen, you look really good for 71. Now you've said that. I usually, when I have people on here and they say their age, some people just look amazing, but for 71, you look amazing, especially when you're doing natural therapy. And natural therapy actually takes you down that route, looking great. Sorry to stop you, but I thought I should give you kudos for looking after yourself. So yeah, you're looking great.
Well, thank you. And, I did it because it was sort of like I didn't have a choice in the beginning. And then I saw benefits and it was like, why stop? I'm going to keep enhancing myself in ways I don't need to fix, but just to feel better and be stronger or whatever. And as I got older, I said, this is the best investment you can make in your life.
Yeah.
So I don't have a huge retirement, but I know guys that have a lot more money than I do, but they're not healthy and they're not happy. I had a good friend die a few months ago because he basically did not listen to me. Even though he was an athlete, he was not taking care of himself, and he died of a heart attack. He texts me at 1 a.m, and then I get a call, later, that morning saying that he died that night.
My God.
Of a heart attack. So, it's like, we don't, this is particularly true, and this is why I'm emphasizing. As guys, we tend not to take care of ourselves until we have to.
Yeah, I've got my hands up. Yeah, I took it for granted with my body, and until certain things happened to me, did I start to get off my ass and do things. And I think you're totally right when it comes to that, Owen. It's quite sad, really, isn't it?
It is, and that could be a soapbox of mine, but one that guys are dying earlier, they're not healthy, and the medicine will not get you healthy. Healthcare is not healthcare, it's sick care, as Andrew Weil said, that one of the first holistic docs, he was going to be our medical director, another clinic I was building, and he's right. And standard medicine is great if you have trauma, break your leg, get in an auto accident, but they don't know how to heal your body.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I tend to find it's a subscription. That's what these medications are. They get you permanently on, and you need to take something of a something of a something. Because what tends to happen is you take medication and you'll find out it's done something to your liver, or it's done something to something else, and then you need a medication for that. Instead of getting to the root of the problem, I think they're too fast giving out medication rather than saying you simply just need to change your diet.
And diet is probably the biggest thing. There's 3 things: diet, stress, and exercise. And and some people focus on one because maybe that's what got them the biggest gain.
Yeah.
But there's usually those 3, and if you really approach those 3 on a fundamental level, you will change your life. And once you change your life or your body, it sort of resets, and it doesn't take much work to not only keep it, but to continually enhance it. And you can turn around a lot, but you get to a certain point and certain things are reversible.
No, you're totally right. That's a conversation in its own right. We can go down the rabbit hole with that one, but I think we'll leave that for another day. So you've had to deal with a huge amount of things in your life. You had the Asperger's, you had the dyslexia, and you've had so many other things. So the strength from you, and I can feel it. You're adamant. You have the passion in knowing that you can heal your body because you've seen the proof, right? And then you've taken that proof and you've seen it within your clients. And when that started happening, when you saw the proof in yourself and you helped that first client, how did you feel?
Yeah, elated. Like, at first, I almost couldn't believe it. But when I had my clinic, people would come to me after they tried everything, and then and docs had given up on them. And there was a big Mayo clinic in Scottsdale, and I get not referrals from them. Later on, we did, but initially I didn't. But people would go, look, I'd done the allopathic traditional medicine route, but I'm not getting well. And I remember one woman, she was probably in her late 40s and, relatively healthy, sitting on my couch in my treatment room, going through everything that they went through at the Mayo Clinic of a week of being there. And then and the final diagnosis was, oh, you're depressed. You got to take Zoloft. And I said, no, you're not depressed. Look, I'm not a doctor or psychiatrist, so that's not official. But I can tell you this, and this. And essentially, I think it's stress. Within a few sessions, she wasn't depressed. And what she was sort of chronically fatigued, exhausted, and tense. And when that started to shift in her body, her, quote, depression or whatever her condition was, just left her. And that's often, we don't realize the impact that stress has on us. Yeah. And here's just a simple bottom line. Stress is a survival state. So a stress state is our nervous system or endocrine system, really our whole body stuck in survival, but not leaving it. And that's essentially what PTSD is. And so when we're in survival, all our resources, as they should be, are oriented to surviving, which means a lot of resources aren't allocated to other things, from digestion, which, medicine sort of knows that, but to healing, to creation, to connection. It's all about the threat, even though we might not think that, but that's how our body is orienting towards life. And so it's spending its resources on surviving. And so I had a guy, a quick example, he was sent by the top holistic physician. He used to fly in from Orange County every couple of weeks to see me. And he looked like Hugh Brenner, big guy, shaved head like yours, good looking like you, and he said, I made my money and my fame going around the world building rubber plants. And then he's like 50 and he's sick and no one could figure it out. And I said, look, again, I'm not a doctor, but I think it's pretty simple. You're just stressed from a lot of hard work. And here's the deal. I think we can help you, but you're going to hit a point where when your body starts letting go of that stress, you're going to be really tired. As your body downregulates, as it starts to relax, it's going to release the stress. And I don't know, 3-4 weeks into it, he flies in to see me. And he said, like a week ago, I was so tired. And this is literally what he said. I couldn't lift the finger on my remote to change the channel.
Wow.
And that, gradually left. And then, he got well.
So hold on, I'm quite curious. So what did you put him through, or what did you advise him for him to release that stress to get to the state where he can be back to himself? What did you advise him?
That was when I was doing the Rolfing. That was a physical therapy. So I was releasing the tension, the chronic tension in his body, particularly the fascia, and it would release. And, there'd be a lag. So it took a few weeks until it sort of accumulated where it just really released. And it shifted from him being stuck in survival, because he wasn't really surviving. He was having a good time, but his body was working really hard. So it was in that gear, that stress state. But he was retired, but his body was stuck there. It was like your accelerator is stuck and your RPMs just won't go down when the car's in neutral. So he was stuck there, but I was able to sort of pull the plug, get his body to release. And at a certain point, his nervous system, endocrine system just relaxed. And then it did that for a few weeks, and then he was well.
My God. I tell you, you're a pillar of strength when it comes to helping people. And what's great about it, you're doing it from a point of view, they don't have to take a pill, because I see it so many times. Unfortunately, I've got a very close friend, and she was given a lot of pills, and unfortunately, she's now on 10 or so pills, because, as you know, you take a pill on a pill and a pill to get over the problems you have on the original thing you was given. And to be able to do that, for you to be able to do that without giving them anything that can harm them, they can naturally do that and pick up where they left off if they have any problems in a year, 2 years time. And they could be anywhere in the world. They don't have to go to a chemist. They don't have to do anything. They can just be in a room with themselves. That's an amazing achievement. You're able to teach people to be able to get better and to take on that skill so they can help themselves. I must admit, I commend you for that. That's a gift to have. But for you to have that gift, you've had to go through trials and tribulations yourself, and that totally shows. So, saying that, where are you at with your business? How do you help people from the point of view? Do you help them individually? Do you help them from groups? Do you help from afar? Do they have to be with you one-to-one? Just tell us how the whole structure of your business goes.
All of that. We do it all: virtual, live, one-to-one, groups.
Okay.
Corporate, like Google X. It's been one of the clients that we've had. So, yeah, I'm impressed with how well virtual works. Better than I would have thought. And we can work.
When did you start that, by the way? The virtual. It sounded like you've started that recently.
I've been coaching people with a phone for years, and then when Zoom happened, I started doing that, and then I developed a course before COVID happened that I was doing virtually, and then when COVID happened, with my other company, we just did everything virtual because we couldn't do the other, and I continued to create virtual trainings that really took off, and doing the somatic stuff just this way is really effective because. And we train guys to do this, which is really rewarding because guys learn it from themselves, their life changed, and then they want to learn how to do it for other men in their group or people in general, professionally. We train therapists, coaches, psychiatrists, how to adapt this to their profession or develop a profession. So we can work with your body just from looking at you right now on the screen and listening to your voice.
And I take it this can be adapted for women. It's not just men.
Yes.
I mean, you specialize particularly yourself, but I take it that it can be used for women also. Yeah.
And so my partner is a couples therapist, and we do couples trainings. We're doing a big retreat down in Costa Rica around Valentine's week. I work with couples more in that sense, sometimes as a coach, but more in the trainings. And I love that because essentially, I'm taking this model of getting that each person and the relationship out of the survival stress state, down-regulated, relaxed. And when we're relaxed, we almost naturally connect. When we're stressed, we almost naturally disconnect. Either we go away, the flight response in some form, or button heads, which is the fight response, or the freeze response, where we're just not doing anything.
How do you feel what you've contributed to people you've come across? Do you feel like you've done something significant? And was it purposely done? Was it purposely planned? Or did you just follow a path and it led you to here?
As I said, I got into this whole health thing and the physical thing because I needed it. And I like doing it, and I saw it worked. I go, maybe it'll work for others, and it exceeded my expectations by a lot. And then I got into men's work because I wanted it. And then, I did a few groups. They were mediocre, but 20 years ago, when I changed the model, it exploded. I did it for myself. And then, that one group in this little town in North Idaho, a town of 8,000, has had over 500 guys go through the groups and now, or either in the group. And, I'm not there anymore. And the whole group is running itself because I train these guys.
Wow. Do you know what, listeners? I'm quite stumped because I don't think he knows how significant he is in the scheme of things in the world. Because, Owen, I know you're here, but I like to speak to the listeners, and I like to say it as it is. The thing is that we can all go for medication, and we can always take the easy path and not be bothered. But what he's actually done, he's showing how your body and how natural things around you, such as food and everything else, is enough for you to actually get on and survive and thrive at the same time. That's very significant. I know a lot of people that just survive on pills and they get worse. And I have a friend now, and I'm quite worried about her because unfortunately she didn't get the help and went down the route of not getting the correct help. It wasn't her fault. And now she's on unlimited amount of pills, on a pill of a pill. And you see the degree of her body is giving up. She cannot focus, and so many other things have happened, and it's quite sad to see. And if she had the chance to meet such a person as Owen, she will be in a completely different situation. She would know what to do if her body gave up again, because Owen, or someone like Owen, would have given that skill set and how to manage your body, your thoughts, physicalities, and that right now will be put her in a position of strength where she can carry on her day and her life in a positive way. And now she's in a situation she can't hardly do anything. And now Owen has potentially helped people live their lives without being in a position like my friend. And it goes in the thousands. And Owen, I give you kudos for that. I don't think you quite know how much you've helped humanity. And
thank you.
And I do mean that.
And it's been a huge gift, because I can't speak for myself, but I think it might be true for others. Think there's anything better than go to bed at night knowing that you've helped even one person. And what I see in my groups is, an average guy will show up to a group, and he shows up maybe with a problem, and that changes sometimes in a month or several months, maybe a year, whatever. And he doesn't need to come to the group anymore because his problem is solved, but he keeps coming because he has a brotherhood and connection. But also what he has is he can show up once a week live or in a virtual group, and his presence, just being present like you are with me, just being who you are and not tripping out and just connecting, is a contribution to another man. So maybe he doesn't even say anything that night in the group, but he just lets a guy speak that has a change. And so his presence or his contribution as a human being, being authentic, is a contribution to another man. And that's one of the reasons that guys get into this work, to do it as a work, and stay in it, because it's so rewarding that when you can just be yourself and help someone.
And do you know what? There's power in what you said, and I tend to say this a lot to a lot of people, to just be comfortable with yourself and be able to express yourself as yourself holds true power, and massively so. And that's another subject in its own right, to accept who you are. And when you look at yourself as if you're looking in the mirror, if you don't like what you see, then you're empowered to change it, and then you're authentic. When you make those changes, you're confident to be yourself. And with that, you draw the right people to you because you don't have a mask on. You are who you are. And if certain people don't warm to you, that's because they're not right for you. While if you're not authentic, you then wonder, why do I get the wrong partner all the time? Why do I get the friends that stab me in the back? Why? It's because you're masquerading as if you're somebody else. And if you're somebody else, those people are drawn to that somebody else, but they're not drawn to you. Owen, does that make sense?
Very well said. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Like in relationships, I often say, and we're taught to be this way. It's like we wrap ourselves up in this beautiful gift wrap, and if we're dating and, and you're wrapped up and, I love that wrapping. And eventually the wrapping falls off and it's like, who the hell are you? And then you're saying, who the hell are you? I didn't know I was getting this. I didn't know I was getting that. But you're right. We get really good at wearing our masks, but our masks, you could say it's ego, but that's what we learn to do to survive.
Yeah.
And it worked. And one of the things I say to people is, great. Good or bad, your survival strategy worked. But what brings you to me or to change is that you've hit the limit of your survival strategy. Now it's sabotaging your life. So it maybe allowed you to survive your childhood, but how you survived it, like the classic is a guy that gets really driven.
Yeah.
And he's very successful. And and it's like he knows how to make money and this and that, and it just sort of comes naturally. Not that he doesn't work, but that strategy, it's not working at home. It's backfiring at home.
Yeah.
And that's usually when he comes to me. And I go, hey, Joe, great. We might help refine or soften some of your work strategies. I'm not going to take any of that away, but we need to develop like your left arm and not just your right arm. So you have these other skill sets, which are buried in you. They're inherent, but you never had an opportunity to develop. You probably never saw a man having it, let alone being trained in it. So we're going to train you how to use these other capacities so that, you're not the entrepreneur, the executive or whatever at home, you're a partner.
That's beautiful. God, I love your mind, Owen. I know I say I have difficulty talking to men, but you're one man I can keep on talking to.
Yeah, you don't have a difficulty.
Yeah, well. No, okay, so let's talk a bit more about your business. So what is the next thing you're rooting for? What's the next stage of your business? Have you got any plans to change things up a bit? Have you got any plans to up things up a bit, or is everything as should be?
We got a great foundation. We have a 10-week intro course, which is deep in one way. It's called Core, which I first developed 10 years. We really refined over the years, and it's an excellent course for guys, and it's all virtual, and it's a great introduction. But again, most of it ends up being experiential. You're in the group with other guys, just connecting, and we just gently take you through that process. And then I have a group coaching program, it's a 12-week program, which is more advanced or deeper. And then we do retreats. We're doing a retreat in February in Joshua Tree in the deserts outside of Southern California. I'm in the process of writing my third book, which is going to be more about all this. And then we have offers to work with companies, a B2B business that we're slowly going to get into as we get caught up on this other stuff.
Okay. Also, there's a lot going on. Oh, okay. Unfortunately, could have put a line in the sand. I'm trying to be disciplined. Otherwise, I end up talking and it ends up being an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I said I was going to be disciplined. So unfortunately, I've got to put a line in the sand, Owen. And so what I'm going to ask you is, how do people get in touch with you if they need your help to enrich their lives?
Well, they can go to our site, which is MELD.community, and it's community spelled out. So they'll immediately on the homepage see a lot of this and sort of get where we're coming from. And there's a wealth of material on the website. Studies have been done on us, where our research comes from, a lot of that. We have a free membership for men where they can connect and they get other free products there to like start groups and all that. And they can reach out to me, Owen at meld.community. I'm glad to talk to guys, really anyone. And then we have that retreat we're doing in Costa Rica for a limited amount of couples.
Okay, so as always, listeners, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put everything down below. You'll be able to reach him very easily. And as you can see, he's the man if you want to change your mindset, physicality, to do with you want to make changes within your business or even your personal life. And as you can see, he does it from a point of view where it's all natural and all positive at the same time. So do it. If you feel something resonates, do it. What can happen? Just have that conversation. Owen, thank you. I'm so glad that you came on here and you gave us your time. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for the honor. And it has been an honor.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're going to leave this conversation, and I'm enjoying it so much. And I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation, as I said at the beginning, but I enjoyed it even more than I thought. So that's a great surprise, and what a plus that is. But in the meantime, listeners, we'll have another podcast coming to you very soon. And sayonara.